Odavashian was a DNA match to June. And then I noticed Julian Castellon. Both of these people matched her on the same chromosome within the same segment range, which to me was an indication that they all shared a common ancestor. But I said to myself, well, who's Julian Castellon? What kind of name is this compared to this Armenian name? I look on Facebook and I find out real quickly that Julian is her son. And so I'm like, okay, that makes sense. And I go on and I notice June Holden, and she is on that same chromosome within the same segment range, actually sharing more DNA with D. Kurkjian. Now who's D? She's a fellow Evidexi, and I was researching her DNA matches. I wanted to know who this fellow Evidexi matched with, and these are some of the people that appeared. And so I wondered, who is June Holden? Let me find out about her. Here is June. She has put together a profile page.
She's done not being here.
She is a profile page, and she says, I want to find out more about my heritage to provide to my family. I'm looking for DNA blood relatives about my biological father. And I immediately knew she doesn't know who her father is. And it seems to me that she's really pleading for help. Anyone, help me. So I wrote her a message. It was through the internal emailing system of 23andMe. I did not know her personal email address. And I said to her, I noticed you match with a couple of Armenians. Do you have Armenian ancestry? And she wrote back almost immediately, and she said, I'm not certain. I was told very little about my paternal information from my mother. She was very private about it and didn't really reveal too much. And after reading her letter, I wrote back, and we exchanged phone numbers. We spoke that same night, and she told me a bit about herself. June was born in 1945 in Richmond, Virginia. She was raised in a family of 4 children, 2 brothers, a sister. Only her mother, her biological mother, who she was raised by, and her biological father knew the truth. The father in her family did not know the truth. At the time of her conception, her parents were separated. They did reconcile, but ultimately they divorced. Here's a photo of June with her family. Can you tell which one she is? She's the petite, olive-skinned, dark-haired lady with her siblings and a nephew. This is what her mother told her, very little. That her father's family owned a deli, that he had a brother, that he was Armenian and Jewish, and that his name was Mike. And I'm like, well, thank goodness there's a first name at least. But, question mark, are you sure you're Jewish, June? What makes you think so? And my gut instinct was, well, if he was in the deli business, perhaps she thought he could be Jewish? I don't know. Why would you think that? I knew that June's mother was born in 1917. I had a feeling her biological father would be born on or before that date. And I figured if he was born in Ottoman Turkey, it was unlikely that he would be Jewish. I wasn't certain, but there was one way to find out, and that was to look at her ancestry composition. Now, this is a report of an estimation of what your ethnic makeup is. No matter if you test for family tree DNA, 23andMe, or ancestry DNA, you will receive something to this effect showing what your ethnic makeup is. And in her case, half European, almost half Middle Eastern. To me, this was a sign that she was definitely Armenian, because Armenians will not show up with saying they are Armenian in any of those DNA testing companies. They will either say they're Middle Eastern or from the Caucasus or other areas that are close. So this type of ancestry composition, it needs to be taken with a grain of salt. Don't take it too literally. If you get 1% Ashkenazi Jew in your ethnic composition, it doesn't mean you're Jewish, okay? It depends on the reference population that these testing companies use. And I will say that Peter and Homan have done an outstanding job of making sure that the ethnicity composition in family tree DNA is as accurate as it can be. And they are with the Armenian DNA Project. So what did I do to help June? I started looking at local directories. I turned to genealogy. I started looking for every Mike, Miran, Manu, Mugardich, every M name I could think of, because I didn't know if Mike was his real name. I figured it could be a nickname. And so these are some of the names of Mikes that I came across in Richmond, Virginia. And I used some of the tools that Tracy had mentioned, or other people have mentioned, maybe putting this asterisk, IAN, knowing that some of the names have been converted, like Luke said, maybe they translated Kurkjian to Baker. I mean, there were all certain different types of circumstances that could have happened, and I didn't want to miss any Mike. So I did zoom in on a particular Michael Darhanian, and it listed his occupation, that he had a restaurant. And I Googled the address that I found in the directory, and Mike's Grill is still standing there today in Richmond, Virginia. I looked at World War II draft records. Mike Barbarian, Mike Basin, no IAN, but he is Armenian. Giragos, Mike Kurkjian, all Mikes. And so I started feeling a little overwhelmed. Maybe I bit off more than I could chew. There were more Mikes than I could ever have imagined in Richmond, Virginia around 1945. And I was really astounded because I had no idea they had such a strong Armenian community. And I put all this information in an Excel spreadsheet. It's a little disheveled, disorganized, but that's the way my brain thinks. I just put all the Mikes out there. I would try to research when were they born, when did they die, were they alive at the time of her birth, what was their occupation, what was their ancestral village, as much as information as I could get, and in particular, what industry were they in? Were they in the restaurant business? As I mentioned, I looked for Mike Darhanian, and I noticed his grill. So I said, let's pick one, let's look him over and see what more detail I can find out about this particular Mike. 1940 census shows him living with his mother and a brother. Just as June had mentioned to me, he has a brother. And then I veered back another 10 years. I looked at the 1930 census. Again, Mike is living with his brother and mother, and it did say he was a soda clerk. But the second time around, I noticed, oh, wait a minute, he wasn't born in Armenia. He wasn't born in Turkey. He was born in Virginia. I thought, wow, 1905 Virginia birth. Amazing to me. So again, I need to get organized, and I used my Family Tree Maker software program to put these names to see if it made logical sense to relationships. It was a simple tree, but I needed to visualize the relationship and to see if it was possible that she could be his daughter. Looking further back, 1920 census, this time there are more members to the family. There's Nishan, who's alive, the father, and his sister Satenig. Now, June never mentioned a sister. And it made me wonder and question, am I in the wrong family? Should I go back and start with a different Mike? I said, no, I'm just going to keep focused on this Mike and finish him off until I go to the next one. And so I was actually happy to see Satenig. Why? Because at this point, there was no proof that either Mike or Harry had had any offspring or descendants. How was I going to prove if June was Mike's daughter, if there was no one to talk to about it? I need to find living relatives. I did find Satenig's birth certificate. It verified what I thought. She was truly the daughter of Nishan Darhanian and his wife Satenig. Nishan Darhanian and Esther Sarafian, that was the mother. She's the true full-blooded relative of Mike Darhanian and his brother Harry. And so I expanded the tree. I've got Satenig now there too. I found Mike Darhanian's marriage certificate. He was married 2 years after June's birth. And what's interesting on this one is that restaurant, divorced. She's also divorced his wife, Ollie. Again, I look up his name. What do I find in Ancestry.com? The divorce decree. Their marriage lasted about 10 years. However, the most important thing about this is not that they're divorced, it's that the number of minor children affected are none. And so I knew that Mike did not have any children with his wife in 1947 time frame, that June did not have a sibling from this union. However, how did I know if he didn't have a child from his previous marriage, as it stated he was divorced when he got married? Then I found Mike Darhanian's death certificate. A big part of me didn't want to see this. I know it's ridiculous. He was born in 1905. I'm pretty sure he wouldn't be living today, but I was hoping that he was because I really wanted to reunite her with her father. He died in 1970 of acute coronary insufficiency. This is Satenig's family. I turned my attention to my sister. She had married a gentleman by the name of Kurkjian, and she did have a daughter named Marian, and I was very excited to see this. So now I have another family member to research. And Marian, turns out, marries a man from my home state of Michigan, Fred Kurkjian. This is a picture of Marian in her yearbook photo. I also found this on Ancestry.com. I looked at the photo, and I noticed something strange in the upper right-hand corner. It said June. I thought, is this a sign or symbol of something to come? What's going on here? I messaged June, and I said, do you think this person looks like you? And she did say, yeah, kind of, a couple differences here and there. And so I put her photo side by side with Marian Abadikian, Marian being the niece of Mike Darhanian. Do they look alike? This is June at the age of 15. So I updated the family tree. I have Mike Darhanian, his sister Satenig, her husband Haji, their daughter Marian, and I know now that she married Fred Kurkjian. The question is, are they first cousins? Can I prove that? Okay, up to this point, all this research has taken place starting on June 10th. Okay, I realized I can keep doing this all night long, maybe until 3 in the morning. My husband's getting mad at me. What are you doing over there? And I figure I really need to start networking. I need to talk to people. I need to figure out who was in Richmond, Virginia during this time frame. I need to gauge this community. Who can I call? First thing I do, what do? Post to the Armenian Genealogy Facebook group. Does anyone know of a Darhanian family in Richmond, Virginia? Nobody did know, but somebody gave a really good tip. Why don't you call Father Barsanian, who now lives in Boston? He used to live in Richmond, Virginia. Excellent. Well, to be honest, before that, I had called the Armenian Church in Richmond, Virginia. Nobody answered, and I left a voicemail, and I gave up on it, thinking they're never going to call me back. So, on June 13th, I called Father Barsanian. Let me get back to him. And I said, Parev, I said, I'm an amateur Armenian genealogist, and I'm looking for information about the Armenian community in Richmond, Virginia. I'd like to learn more about the men that live there and perhaps people that were in the restaurant industry. And he gave me his time, and he was very kind, and he told me that perhaps you should talk to John Baronian in Virginia. And he never gave me his phone number, but I appreciate the fact that he gave me a contact name. So at that point, I used the internet again, NEWho.com, which is another white pages online, and there he was. And so I called him up, and these were both like cold calls, so to speak. They didn't expect my phone call. And he was very receptive. He told me that you know who you need to speak to? You need to speak to Ann Norris. Her mother was a Darhanian. And I thought, okay, this is good. And so with his blessing, and he gave me her phone number, I called Ann up. And Ann is here today. Where is she? Ann, stand up. Yeah. And I called her up, and I said I was speaking to John Baronian, and I was telling him the story about June, and she was 70 years old. She didn't know her biological father. She was missing a part of her identity. And I had explained to him, the whole thing, and to her, the whole story. And I said, I'm an amateur genealogist, and I've researched as much as I can about this, but, I need your help. And she said, Janet, I was always interested in my genealogy. I'm glad you called. And it was so refreshing to hear those words from her. She didn't dismiss me. She listened to me, to what I had to say, and she was quite receptive. And she told me about the Darhanian family and what she knew about them. They were indeed cousins with Mike, his brother, the sister, but it was maybe a little bit more of a distant relationship. It wasn't a first cousin relationship. And so she did tell me a bit about Harry because the brother was single, never married, and never had children. And so I knew I was right in my inkling that the brother didn't have any children either, and that they would have Harry over for holidays, Easter, Thanksgiving, Christmas. Mike had died earlier in 1970, so she didn't have as much hara perujun with him, as I should say. Can't think of the English word right now for some reason. But anyway, by the end of the conversation, I didn't even have to ask her. She said she wanted to take the DNA test, that she was interested, and guess what? Extra bonus for me, her mother was interested. And at this point, I am absolutely elated. I can't believe my ears. This flush of excitement came over me. And then I knew I had to control or contain that excitement because even if they were a DNA match, it was probably going to be a little bit more of a distant DNA match. Because as I mentioned, June's potential father, Mike, was not a first cousin to Anne or his mother. I knew it was a bit of a more distant relationship, right? And so with DNA testing, the closer the match, the more exact the prediction of your relationship. So if you take a DNA test and you land a first cousin match, you are accurate. You're right dead on. And you may land a second cousin match, dead on. Beyond second cousin, the prediction gets a little fuzzy. It won't tell you exactly how you're related. It's not going to tell you what Aquidis, Yakbidin, Darhanian, Afchigin told me. It won't tell you any of that. It'll just give you an indication of the range of the relationship. And so I was very thankful to Anne and her mother for doing this, but I still had to contain my excitement. And so what did I do next? I turned my attention back to the Darhanian family, Satenig's family, and her daughter Marion, who had married Fred Khachaturian. I found Fred Khachaturian's obituary saying that he survived by his wife Marion and the daughter Karen. Now, Karen's name jumped out at me, and not to be sexist here, but sometimes women tend to be a little more active on Facebook than men, not always. But in this situation, I was right and lucky that Karen was on Facebook. And so now, keeping track of the chronological order of things, it is June 15th, I contact Karen on Facebook. I didn't immediately send her a message. I was so scared to do so because I knew that if she didn't see the message, because I was not her Facebook friend, or even worse, she ignored my message, and I would never have that closure of knowing what happened or how would I prove June's paternity. I decided to find a friend of a friend of a friend. And that's exactly what I did. I researched her circle of friends, Karen's. I didn't notice too many Armenians. And so I didn't even know who they were, but I clicked on their Facebook profile, and then I searched their circle of friends. And by the time that went 3 or 4 ways out, I found somebody I knew. And that person is here today too. Don't be embarrassed. Lisa Hagopian, thank you for hooking me up. Okay, so Lisa hooked me up because her sister knew somebody who knew Karen. So it all worked out, and she knew to expect my message. And as soon as I sent that message, I said, Karen, can we talk? And she said, sure. So after talking and discussing and saying, hello, I know you don't know me, but I'm an amateur genealogist, and I'm trying to help a woman get some closure in her life. And I told her the story. I told her about the Darhanians, how nice they were in Virginia, and I was just kind of trying to steer her in the direction of, I need like a closer cousin match. Now, I didn't come out and say that directly, but I gave a lot of hints. And so I let her think about it. I know it was a little bit, maybe she was taken aback a little bit, and let her digest this information. In the meanwhile, there were photos being exchanged. About a week and a half later, she did agree to take the DNA test, and even better, her mother agreed to take the test. So at this point, I'm getting really nervous and excited, And so this is one of the photos of Mike Darhanian, his sister Satenig, his brother Harry, the father Nishan, and the mother Esther. I think that June looks like Esther, to be honest with you. So the results on July 14 come in, and the Darhanians in Richmond, Virginia are confirmed cousins, meaning Anne, see how it says estimated relationship third to fourth cousin? It doesn't tell me exact. And her mother, Elizabeth, second to third cousin. I'm like, wow, this is getting good. What's going to happen? So I'm on pins and needles for a while here, wondering how much longer is it going to take to process the DNA kit for the people in Michigan. And I'm sitting there checking my computer every day. And I forgot to mention this, but I will say it now, that June gave me full disclosure and access to her 23andMe account because she knew that I needed information in order to make this work. I couldn't do it just from looking at screenshots. I really needed to drill into her matches and to see if anybody was closely related to her. I have not found any close matches for her that were Armenian. The closest match is probably estimated fourth to fifth cousin, and I knew that was not going to work. It was going to be way too far out and too difficult to figure out. And so the magical moment came in on July 29th, and it showed that Karen Khachaturian, the woman in Michigan who was on Facebook, came in as first to second cousin, and definitively, Marion Khachaturian came in as first cousin. She is the niece of Mike Darhanian, and she is indeed June's first cousin. And so we know that June Holden is now officially part of the Darhanian family tree. She's found her place. She knows who her father was. She's learned more about her cousins. And she's just, ecstatic. And I'm so happy to bring that closure to her life. And so I could not contain my excitement over all these events transpiring. And I thought to myself, I'm just running around the house screaming for joy, thinking it's like Happy New Year type of thing. And my children don't understand. My husband doesn't understand. Why am I so excited? They actually probably think I just found another relative from Everett. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. The whole thing about being excited about this experience was that it proved to me how DNA can work, and DNA can work so nicely with genealogy. It's unbelievable. DNA is not a substitute for genealogy, but it sure is a great partner. So, what did I do? I talked to somebody who would listen. I text Stephen Kurkjian, and I say, who better to contact than a reporter, right? Pulitzer Prize winning reporter, journalist, right? He's going to spread the good word. So he did me a huge honor. He took on this article, and he did it so nicely, so humbly, so graciously, at a time when he was so busy on his own book tour. And, I didn't have to nag too hard. He said, don't worry, Janet, I'll get it written. And I was very, very grateful. And so, June Holden and her father, Mike Darhanian, they could not be reunited on this earth today. And it's sad, but really, in conclusion, it's through DNA, genealogy, technology, networking, research, persistence, a little bit of guts,